Welcome to All Pro Football Data. My name is Jim Coburn, and today's episode, we're talking about the Green Bay Packers 2024 NFL Draft Class Review, taking a look at all their selections based on production, athleticism, and other statistical factors. Stay tuned into the end of the video where I reveal the overall grade for the Packers. But if you're new to the channel, you're new to the stuff that I do, I definitely recommend you check out my top 50 prospects video that goes into all the correlations, all the information that you need to know about my draft grades. And the biggest takeaways realistically is this: for the most part, 86% of long term starters in the NFL at various positions typically scored between 70 or higher in terms of their overall data grade coming out. To learn more about data grades, you can check out any of the other videos that I had. You can go to my Patreon page.com, but I get into all that kind of stuff with that. But the data grade is simply a aggregation of their production, their athleticism, their physical metrics, and all the other things that go into that particular thing. But with all that stuff out of the way, let's get to the needs assessment. So this is what the Green Bay Packers need from a data perspective. So when you rank the other prospects in the NFL in terms of positional AV, which is how they actually have performed on a per year basis. And the data grade isn't really factored into this. It's just NFL positional data. So a lot of you guys may think data grades are iffy, but again, I'm basing it on how they actually performed. And when you look at that, these are some of the needs that they need after looking at everything and ranking everything. Okay, they need a quarterback. Now, I understand a lot of you guys are going to say Jordan Love is the future. Jordan Love is great, and he did have a very good season last year, but it was one good season. So until he has another good season and another good season, which is going to raise his overall average up positional AV wise, it's going to be a need. So I understand this is a decision that you ultimately have to make as a viewer. If you believe that Jordan Love is going to continue to have the success he had last year, this year, then you stick with him and you don't worry about this need. But if you have some concerns, or if you have something in the back of your head going, all right, he had a really good season last year, but what if, right? Always prepare for a rainy day. So from that perspective, the Green Bay Packers are probably going to target a quarterback at some point in the draft. I mean, that based on their needs assessment, again, not to take anything away from Jordan Love, they're not going to take a quarterback in the first round, but late round, they probably are going to take a quarterback just as insurance if Jordan Love doesn't continue his progress as a quarterback. Next up, we get to the offensive line. Offensive line is another position that does need some help in terms of the offensive positions. But most of the real needs on the Packers really come down to the defensive side of the football. The edge position is pretty low. They're 28 out of 32 teams in terms of edge rusher production over the last couple seasons in terms of how they produce from average wise. And again, this is another thing where if you feel like Lucas Van Ness continues to improve and develop into a really good edge rusher that gets 10 plus sacks a year, then maybe you don't think that you have as big of a need at the edge position. But so far, this is how the guys in the roster have performed as edge rushers over the last couple of years, and it's not that great. So you have to kind of take that into account. Defensive tackle is another area of need. Cornerback, safety are other areas of need. Again, there's always going to be the development portion of it. Like, well, we got good players there. They just got to develop. Right. I'm not basing it on the development curve. I'm basing it off of how they actually have performed. So these are the needs based on how this roster has performed in the past up to this point, regardless of whether or not they develop and become better long term. Okay. Now, biggest factors in terms of my final grade. Did they meet their rostered needs? That's a big thing because they have needs on the roster. They have long term needs. They have short term needs. They have all those kinds of things. Did they meet those needs? That's a big thing in terms of my grading, okay? Second of all, did they draft good prospects? And the way that I define good prospects is prospects that have a high chance of potentially becoming a starter versus other players. Based on the data work that I've done, and you can check out my other videos, like in my top 50 prospects videos and other stuff like that, I've found that 70%, actually not even 70%, 86% of long-term starters at various positions. Every position is a little bit different, but for the most part, 86% of most positions have at least a 70 or higher data grade in terms of long-term starters. So if you're going to target a player, they better have a 70 or higher data grade. They really can. And it's not to say that there's not going to be guys who score 60 or 50 or below average that don't become long-term starters, but those are outliers. Those are players that are not consistently being starters, and a lot of times those are also players who are underperforming at the positions that they play. So just keep that stuff in mind as we get through these data grades. Another way that I grade is I look at, did they draft prospects that have the data potential to outperform their draft status. So as you go further in the draft, there's going to be less success rates. Whether you once you start from the first round all the way down to the seventh round, if you draft a guy in the seventh round, there's a significantly less chance that guy is actually going to become successful. So the way to bump that up is by taking a guy who actually has a data grade that is high, because most of the players who broke out in the seventh, the sixth, the fifth, the fourth round typically had really good data grades. So if they don't have good data grades, then you're just decreasing your chances of success in those particular rounds. So, but with all this stuff out of the way, let's get to their picks. So, starting with pick 25 and Jordan Morgan, offensive tackle out of Arizona. His data grade was 88.28 out of 100. His floor was 84.43, and balance grade was 86.36. The data grade ceiling is basically the average AV of a prospect that scored at 88, scored in a similar area in terms of all of his production traits, and not really production, but athleticism, length, size, all that kind of stuff is put into that grade for offensive linemen. So that is essentially what most players who tested like him in the process end up becoming, which is 88 percentile players. Okay. Now the floor grade takes a look at what the average floor is for prospects who tested like him in his round range, which is pick 25. So most of the offensive linemen that were drafted in that area that scored like him typically had an 84 percentile score overall in terms of their average. And then the balance grade takes a look at the ceiling plus the floor together to give like a balanced perspective. So more likely than not, Jordan Morgan at the very average area of his potential would be about 86 percentile. He could be better, he could be worse, but the bottom average area for how he tested would be about 86 percentile, and that's what he tested as a prospect. Now, his AV is 83.78 out of 100, which is essentially what the average AV score is for a prospect picked at 25. So if you just blindfolded yourself and randomly selected a player at pick 25, they would have an 83 percentile score in terms of their NFL production, not their data grade, their actual production as an NFL player. So from that perspective, I would give this overall grade a B, because again, his data grade, his floor for prospects in that range is about 86 percentile, which is a B. 86. If you get 86 on a test, you get a B. So that's kind of how I do my grading here. All right. Now, when you look at his athleticism traits, he does have some decent traits here. 89 percentile in terms of speed, 65 percentile in terms of explosiveness for his size. Those are all good traits at the position. And he had good strength of schedule, strength of team data as well. So he's very athletic. He played at a pretty good football team, so it's not like he played at Holy Cross or some, uh, other team out there. And because of that, he has pretty good data all around. So good pick. It could have been better, but good pick. Okay. Now get to pick 45. Edgerrin Cooper, linebacker out of Texas A&M. His data grade is 90.97. His floor is 87.61, and his balance grade is 89.29. So this pick is pretty much 89% better than all the other linebackers picked at pick 45, or in that range of possibilities in that sort of second round area. So that's very good. His pick AV, what is usually expected from the 45th pick, is 85 percentile. Overall, I would give this pick an A. He has that average ability in terms of his overall data of being a 90 plus percentile linebacker, which means he's 90% better than all the linebackers, the starting linebackers in the NFL to a certain extent, which is good for him. And when you look at his production traits, really good sack data, really good TFL data, didn't have the best solo tackle data. He had 67 percentile. You could round up to 68 in terms of the starter averages at the position. But when you look at his other traits, his forced fumble market share, his pass deflection market share, his interception market share, all those numbers are fantastic. So in many ways, he has a lot of things in common with guys like Fred Warner, who's probably the best example of this, because Fred Warner was a guy who didn't have the best solo tackle score, but he had really good sack TFL production, really good forced fumble, pass deflection, interception data. So he's a little bit more of a coverage linebacker, but definitely a really good linebacker prospect for them. And then athleticism wise, near elite speed for his size with uh, about average explosiveness and above average flexibility. This is pretty decent traits athletically. He's not an elite level athlete, but he is a above average athlete, which is kind of what you're looking for. And then when you look at his adjusted production traits, he's above the starter averages. He's near the Pro Bowl All Pro averages. So he pretty much has as much potential as you would really expect from a round two linebacker, and it's probably one of the better picks. He really is. He's a fantastic player, and I'm really excited to see what happens with him. Then, of course, we get to pick 58 and Javon Bullard, safety out of Georgia. The Packers took a lot of safeties in this draft class, but he's one of the first. His data grade is 89 percentile. His floor is 72. His balance grade is 80. The pick AV here is 74.52. Overall pick grade here, I would give a B plus based on his data grade. His ceiling grade in many ways. Now, in terms of his market share production, not the best. Above average, but nothing is really elite or near the starter averages. When you look at his athleticism traits, this is where he really shined. Really good speed and flexibility for his size with above average explosiveness. Pretty much is within the starter and Pro Bowl averages in terms of athleticism traits, which is really good. And then when he gets his adjusted production traits, this is where he did really well too. So again, adjusted production is taking a look at where that player played as a prospect in terms of strength of schedule, strength of team, age. So this is his production for where he played, which was at Georgia, which was a very tough football team. So because of all those factors, he scored tremendously well and has a really good shot to be a really good starting safety for the Green Bay Packers. Then, of course, we get to pick 88 in MarShawn Lloyd, running back out of USC. His data grade is 80.92 out of 100. His floor is 47. His balance grade is 64. Pick AV is 69.88. Overall pick grade for this would be a B. Taking a look at his offensive market share production scores, below average in terms of all of his data. A lot of that is because of injury and other stuff like that. But he does have great efficiency scores. So his yards per touch, his yards per reception, his TD percentage, all those numbers were really good for him. And then when you look at athleticism traits, 80 percentile in terms of explosiveness, 90 percentile in terms of speed, those are really great athleticism numbers for a running back. And then when you get to adjusted production, not the best, but overall, he is a good prospect, but there are risks. I mean, there's a reason why he's only an 80 percentile running back based on his data. He has some production concerns, he has some age concerns, he has a couple different concerns here and there, and of course, injury history. So he is a bit of a gamble, but there are some positives here, which is why he's an 80 percentile prospect. Okay. Then, of course, we get to pick 91, which is Tyrone Hopper, linebacker out of Missouri. His data grade is 83 percentile, floor is 69, balance grade is 76, and pick AV is 67.57. Overall pick grade based on his ceiling would be a B. Taking a look at his market share scores, really good solo tackle and TFL data, below average sack data, but that's expected out of pursuit or sideline to sideline linebackers. Most of the time, they're really good in terms of getting tackles for loss and solo tackles, not so hot in terms of getting sacks because they're not asked to do that, so they normally don't produce like that. Okay. Next up, we get to linebacker market share production. Taking a look at forced fumble market share, pass deflection market share, interception market share. All those areas are covered here. Then you get to athleticism traits, 70 percentile in terms of explosiveness, average speed, below average flexibility. Again, he's not the best athlete ever, but the biggest selling point is his adjusted production traits. Taking a look at the starter averages and Pro Bowl averages at the linebacker position, he pretty much is within range of those possibilities. So even though he does have some concerns from an athleticism standpoint, he does hit at least the range of production that you want a player of his caliber to hit to do good things. Then, of course, you get to pick 111 in Evan Williams, safety out of Oregon. His data grade is 77.88 out of 100. His floor is 58.19 with a balance grade of 68.04. Pick AV is 65.64. I would give this overall grade here or pick here a C. Taking a look at his data, 87 percentile solo tackle, 81 percentile in terms of interceptions, and 44 percentile in terms of pass deflection data. These numbers are, a little wonky, but there's some decent stuff here. Taking a look at athleticism traits, he did have a 90 plus percentile explosion score, which is pretty darn good for a safety. But then he had a 66 percentile flexibility or change of direction athleticism score, and then below average speed. So there are some risks with him from his athleticism profile. And then when you get to his adjusted production traits, good adjusted production in terms of his pass score. Age is a little less. So overall, he is a risky prospect. There are some positives to him, but he also is a little bit more risky as well. So kind of a iffy pick here, but not the worst pick. Then, of course, we get to pick 163 and Jacob Monk, center out of Duke. His data grade is 81.18 out of 100. His floor is 47.33. Balance grade is 64.25, and pick AV would be 41 percentile, with an overall pick grade of a B. Taking a look at his athleticism traits, he has near elite speed and above average explosiveness for his size. All of those traits are decent traits to have at the center position, more than enough, really, for how most centers test. So this is a really good pick from that kind of perspective. Then, of course, we get to pick 169 and Keaton Aladapo, safety out of Oregon State. Another safety, another one, 78.26 out of 100. Projected floor is 40. Balance grade is 59. For pick AV of 25.48. Overall pick grade would be a C. Taking a look at his production traits, very similar production to a lot of the other safeties, actually, or at least Tyrone Hooper, who's actually a linebacker. But above average solo tackle data, above average pass deflection data, above average interception data, but that's not his most prolific trait. Taking a look at athleticism traits, he has above average explosiveness and speed with below average, didn't really test in terms of flexibility, but that's kind of how he tested there. And then in terms of adjusted production traits, really good pass score. Age is a little suspect. Again, he's one of the three safeties they selected. So one of the big needs that I noticed in terms of my evaluation was a safety position, and they seem determined to try to find somebody to fill that need. So I do think this is interesting because all three of these guys do have starter potential at the position. Then, of course, we get to pick 202 and Travis Glover, offensive tackle out of Georgia State. His data grade is 44 percentile. His floor is 45. Balance grade is 44.78. Pick AV would be 21.24 out of 100 with an overall pick grade of an F. Taking a look at his athleticism traits, not really there for him. 43 percentile explosion, 43.97 in terms of speed, and then 29 percentile in terms of flexibility for his size. Not the best traits overall for him, but he does hit at least above the starter threshold. So I see him more as a backup rotational offensive lineman, not somebody that has starter potential, which is why they got an F for this particular selection. Then, of course, we get to pick 245 and Michael Pratt, quarterback out of Tulane. Remember when I talked about quarterbacks? Remember? Remember? Okay. Again, I'm not trying to say he's going to replace the quarterback you currently have right now. I definitely think Jordan Love has a chance to repeat what he did last year, but they did draft a quarterback just as a little insurance, just a little, just a little something there. Now, he's not the best quarterback prospect ever. 55 percentile is what his overall data grade was. Floor is 29, balance grade is 42, with a pick AV of 19.69. I would give this overall grade, pick grade a F. Taking a look at his mobile quarterback ability, he does have decent mobile quarterback ability in the near the 90 percentile area. So he's 80 percentile area for him. Based on my data in the past, I did a video on Michael Pratt, which you can check out on my channel as well. He was kind of similar to like Andy Dalton, Ryan Tannehill, those types of players, kind of how he tested most like. And when you look at his production traits, 79 percentile in terms of his best quarterback efficiency score, and 58 percentile in terms of his career quarterback efficiency score. So that's kind of how he tested overall. And it's not bad, but again, it could be better. Then, of course, you get to Kalen King, cornerback out of Penn State. His data grade is 77.95 out of 100. His floor is 37 percentile. Balance grade is 57. And then his pick AV is .77. So the vast majority of players picked at pick 255 become absolutely nothing. But he does have a good data grade. And overall, I would give this grade a C. Taking a look at his production traits, really good pass deflection data, below average solo tackle and interception data, Taking a look at athleticism traits, he does have above average explosiveness, above average flexibility, with below average speed for his size. So he does have some questionable athleticism traits at the cornerback position, but he does hit at least the prerequisites for a potential starter. And then when you look at adjusted production traits, this is the area where he really shined. Really good age score and his pass score. Production for his age, for his level of competition, was pretty decent overall. So not the worst pick ever. And again, you're picking him at a really low selection that really is probably not going to become anything. And at least he has a shot based on his overall data to maybe carve out a role if he's able to kind of rise up the depth chart. So overall, the final grade I would give the Packers would be a B plus. It's really close to an A. It really is. If you want to give them an A because you're a Packers fan, go ahead. But I would say this, did they meet their roster needs? I would say yes and no. Did they draft good prospects? Yes, they drafted a lot of really good prospects. Did they draft prospects that can outperform their draft status? Absolutely. The Packers went defensive heavy in this class, but they also grabbed offensive linemen to fill out their depth chart. And the two biggest positions that had the most depth in this class on the offensive side of the football was the offensive line, and the biggest depth in terms of the defensive side of the football was the safety position. So it is interesting that they would take multiple selections in the offensive line and multiple selections in the safety position when those are two of the deepest positions in this class based on a data perspective. So very interesting, very interesting. Now, I think the edge position was not really addressed. Van Ness will need to hurry up and produce. Otherwise, I think that will be a need in the future for the Pack. But overall, that is the assessment of the Packers draft. I think they did fantastic all around. I think they got good value throughout the draft. There were some suspect picks here and there, but please don't stone me just because I hated on a special teams guy. Because the fact of the matter is, special teams guys just have less value than other players. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Jim Coburn. You can check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/jcoburn. Consider becoming a patron there to support the channel and also get more information about the draft and the NFL. Also, check out my X, formerly known as Twitter account, at Geometrics. Check out my tweets on there. With all the stuff out of the way, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.